My son-in-law told me his parents were moving into my house. He said if I didn't like it, I could leave. He thought he had me backed into a corner. He didn't know that cornered old men are the most dangerous. I didn't argue. I just smiled and told him I'd get the house ready for their arrival. But the surprise I prepared wasn't fresh linens and a welcome mat. It was a lesson in respect served cold. Before I tell you exactly what I did, hit that like and subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story of a promise kept has traveled. The birdsong outside my window was the only music in my house. I'd spent the morning installing an oak bookshelf, and the fresh scent of wood, a smell of satisfaction, still hung in the air. At 70 years old, these hands hadn't forgotten how to build something solid from scratch. This wasn't just a house. It was my final statement built on land my grandfather bought with calloused hands and hard-earned dollars. Every plank, every stone was steeped in the sweat and pride of the Richardson name. The tablet chimed a dry digital sound that fractured the quiet. My daughter Brenda's face appeared on the screen bright as a sunflower. But I know my daughter. I know that smile. It was too bright, trying too hard. Behind it was a cloud only a father can see. "Hey, Dad," she said, her voice cheerful. "The house looks amazing. Are you all settled in?" "Just about, sweetheart," I replied, turning the tablet to show her the new bookshelf. "Just a few odds and ends. The air out here is incredible. Saw a deer in the backyard this morning." Brenda clapped weakly. "That's wonderful, Dad. I'm so happy for you." Her eyes darted to the side for just a second, then back. A familiar tell. Kyle was there. And right on cue, another face pushed into the frame, filling it with a wide grin that seemed friendly but didn't reach his eyes. Kyle Anderson, my son-in-law. "Morning, Theo," he said, his tone like he was talking to an employee. He never called me Dad. "Looks all right. Big improvement over the old apartment." I didn't respond to the backhanded compliment. My old apartment was where Brenda grew up, where the walls echoed with the laughter of my late wife Beatrice. Kyle didn't notice. He never noticed things that couldn't be valued in dollars. "Quick question for you," he said, glancing at Brenda, then locking his eyes on me. "Did you get the high-speed internet hooked up yet? My parents aren't used to slow connections. My mom needs it for her shows." I felt something tighten in my chest, a simple question, a practical question. But the delivery was all wrong. My parents aren't used to slow connections, as if their presence in my house on my land was a foregone conclusion, as if their comfort was the priority and my peace was an afterthought. Brenda jumped in quickly, her smile looking painful now. "He's just planning ahead, Dad. Karen complains about that stuff." "I understand," I said slowly, keeping my voice even. "I'm on the basic plan. It's enough for me." Kyle smirked. "Basic plan. Come on, Theo. It's the 21st century. You should upgrade. Think of it as an investment in the future. For when guests come to visit, everything needs to be ready." An investment in the future. The phrase hung in the air. He didn't say it, but I heard it. The future he was talking about wasn't mine. In his eyes, I was just the temporary caretaker of an asset that would soon be his. "I'll look into it," I lied. "Good." Kyle nodded, satisfied. He patted Brenda's shoulder, a gesture more of ownership than affection. "Anyway, we gotta run. Got a showing over by the lake. People are paying crazy money for waterfront property these days." He winked at me. He winked at. "Location is everything, right, Theo?" Then they were gone. The screen went dark. The house was quiet again, but now it was a tainted quiet. The smell of fresh oak no longer felt like satisfaction. It felt like the smell of something about to be taken. I looked out the window at the forest my grandfather taught me to respect. Kyle didn't see trees. He only saw lots. The smoldering fire inside me, the one that had been just embers for years, had just been given a little gust of wind. And I knew this was only the beginning. The next day I decided to spend some time unpacking the old boxes in the storage shed, the pieces of a life I'd carefully wrapped. I wasn't doing it just to clean. I was doing it to remember who I was. I opened a trunk labeled Theo's office. On top lay my heavy metal T-square, its edges worn smooth from decades of use. I picked it up, feeling the familiar weight in my hand. Kyle had seen it once at my old apartment and laughed. "Man, do people still use these? We've got CAD software for everything now." He said it not out of malice, but out of sheer ignorance. He couldn't understand that the bridges that spanned rivers, the skyscrapers that rose from the earth all started with a single line drawn by a tool just like this. He didn't see the hard work, only the obsolescence. I set the T-square aside and pulled out a roll of old blueprints, the plans for the Memorial Bridge, my first project as lead engineer. I remembered the dedication ceremony. Beatrice stood beside me, her hand in mine, her eyes shining with pride. Brenda, just 6 years old, sat on my shoulders. "Did you build that, Daddy?" she had asked, her voice full of awe. "I did, Princess," I'd answered, "so everyone can get home safe." I remembered the first dinner Kyle had at our home. He sat across from me at the dining table my own grandfather had built. After the initial pleasantries, his first real question wasn't about my work, not about my family. He asked, "So what does a civil engineer in this city pull in Mr. Richardson?" Beatrice had kicked me gently under the table, a silent signal to keep my cool. I had answered politely, but I'd already made my first assessment of the man. A man measured not by what he builds, but by what he owns. I kept sorting. Another box, this one filled with old photographs. There was one of Beatrice and me on our wedding day. She was beautiful in a simple white dress. We didn't have much money, but we had everything. Underneath it was another photo taken years later on a camping trip. We were setting up a tent on this very piece of land where I now stood. Beatrice was laughing, her hair a mess from the wind. "Someday," she had said, "we'll build a house here, Theo, a place for us to grow old together." And I had done it. I had kept my promise. But I had to do it alone. I remembered the day Brenda called to tell me she'd accepted Kyle's proposal. I had tried to be happy for her. But a small voice in the back of my head kept nagging me. I remembered the times Kyle had casually mentioned his friends who were flipping properties in the suburbs for a quick profit. I remembered the times he'd asked about the zoning situation in this area, feigning a casual interest. I had dismissed those worries, telling myself I was being overprotective, an old man seeing shadows. I didn't want to create conflict. I found a small wooden box containing my medals and awards, the Distinguished Service Medal from the Engineers Society, a citation from the mayor's office for the downtown revitalization project. I used to have them on the wall in my study, but after Brenda and Kyle moved into a larger house, she had gently suggested they looked a little boastful, and maybe I should put them away. "The style now is more minimalist, Dad," she had said. Kyle stood behind her, nodding in agreement. I took them down not because I agreed, but because I didn't want to embarrass my daughter. But now looking back, I realize it wasn't about style. It was about erasing my story, diminishing my accomplishments so that Kyle's could shine brighter. Every object I touched told a story of work and love and sacrifice, and every memory was tainted by Kyle's presence like an oil slick on a clear pond. His disrespect wasn't a single act, but a slow, grinding campaign that had gone on for years. It chipped away at Brenda's confidence. It reduced my legacy to a number on a balance sheet, and it did it all with a smile and a friendly pat on the back. I closed the trunk. The unpacking was done. I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt a cold, hard clarity. I had seen the individual pieces for years, but now in the quiet of this house, they had finally clicked together into a complete picture. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a plan, and I was standing right in the middle of it. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was Brenda. No video call this time. Just her voice, small and tight like she was talking from inside a closet. "Dad," she whispered, "are you busy?" "No, sweetheart. What's wrong?" I asked, keeping my own voice calm. She hesitated. I could hear her uneven breathing on the other end of the line. "It's just, I have something to ask you." "Go on, Brenda." "Well, Kyle, he has this huge investment opportunity. Really huge, Dad. A real estate deal that could change everything for us, for the kids' future." I stayed silent, waiting. I knew what was coming. "But he needs a little more capital to get in on it," she continued, her voice getting smaller. "The banks are being difficult because of the market. It's just a timing thing, but the opportunity won't wait. I was wondering if maybe you could loan us the money." A chill went down my spine. This was it. No more hints or casual questions about property values. This was a direct play. "How much?" I asked, my voice flat. There was a long pause. I heard a muffled sound like she was covering the phone. 50,000, she finally breathed. We'd pay you back as soon as the deal closes, probably within 6 months. With interest, of course. $50,000. It wasn't a small amount, but I could cover it. It was part of the nest egg I had built for my own old age, a cushion of security. But it wasn't about the money. Brenda, I said, my voice gentle but firm, my savings are to make sure that if anything ever happens, you and the grandkids are secure. It's a safety net, not a venture capital fund. But it's a sure thing, Dad, she said quickly, desperation creeping into her voice. Kyle has researched it completely. He says it can't fail. There are no sure things in business, you know that. And I don't know Kyle's partners or this project. I paused, choosing my words carefully. My money, the legacy from your mother and your grandparents, is for building on solid ground, not for gambling on the future. The silence on the other end was heavy. I didn't hear crying, just a hollow emptiness. I knew I had disappointed her, but I also knew that if I said yes, I wouldn't just be losing money. I would be losing the last of my authority. I would be conceding that Kyle had a claim on what was mine. I understand, Brenda finally said, her voice devoid of emotion. I just thought I should ask. I love you, Brenda, I said. I love you too, Dad. I have to go. The call ended. I sat there for a few minutes, completely still. I didn't doubt Brenda's love for me, but I could see how trapped she was. She was trying to keep the peace between a father she loved and a husband who manipulated her. And in that tug of war, Kyle was winning. This phone call wasn't just a refusal of a loan, it was a declaration. I had drawn a line in the sand. And I had a very bad feeling that Kyle wasn't going to respect it. He was going to try to cross it or erase it completely. The smoldering fire now had fresh fuel. I knew a storm was coming. The phone rang 2 days after I had drawn my line in the sand. I was sitting on the porch watching the late afternoon sun filter through the tall pines, feeling a fragile sense of peace. I had made my decision about the loan, and while I knew it had hurt Brenda, it felt right. It felt like a boundary I needed to set. When I saw Kyle's name on the screen, a knot formed in my stomach. I almost let it go to voicemail. A part of me, the part that still wanted to avoid conflict, screamed to just ignore it. But another part, a part that had been dormant for too long, knew I couldn't. I had to face this. I swiped to answer. Hello, Kyle, I said, my voice steady. Theo, got a minute? He didn't wait for an answer. Listen, I've got some great news. My parents sold their place in Florida. The deal closed yesterday. It all happened a bit faster than we expected, but it's a seller's market, you know. I said nothing. I could hear the fake enthusiasm in his voice, the practiced tone of a salesman about to close a deal you never wanted in the first place. So, he continued a little too brightly, they need a place to land, and Brenda and I were thinking your new house is the perfect solution. It's got all that space, fresh air, exactly what they need. They'll be there at the end of the month. They're taking the master bedroom, the one with the balcony. Mom will love having her morning coffee out there. The world seemed to slow down. The sound of the birds, the rustle of the leaves, it all faded into a dull roar in my ears. I felt the smooth wood of the porch railing under my hand, grounding me. Did he just say what I thought he said? He wasn't asking. He was informing. He spoke about my home, my master bedroom, the room I had designed with a rocking chair in the corner where Beatrice would have sat, as if it were a hotel room he had just booked online. The audacity of it was like a physical blow knocking the air from my lungs. I thought of my grandfather clearing this land with his bare hands. I thought of my father planting the very pine trees I was looking at now. I thought of Beatrice, her sketches for this house spread across our old kitchen table, her face lit with excitement. Every inch of this place was a testament to a legacy of love and hard work, and this man was talking about it like it was a vacant property, a convenience. For a moment I was speechless. A hot, furious wave surged up from my chest, so intense it made my vision swim. I wanted to yell. I wanted to curse him with every foul word I knew. I wanted to tell him exactly what kind of parasitic, disrespectful leech he was. I wanted to tell him that he and his parents were not welcome within 100 miles of this sacred ground. But I couldn't get the words out. The rage was a log jam in my throat. He took my silence as agreement, or perhaps he just didn't care enough to wait for a response. Brenda thinks it's a great idea, by the way, he added, twisting the knife. It'll be good for you to have some company, keep you from getting lonely out there in the sticks. The condescension in his voice was sickening. He was painting me as a feeble old man who needed to be managed, whose own home was a resource to be allocated by him. He was erasing me from my own life. I finally found my voice, but it was hoarse, barely a whisper. "Kyle, you can't be serious." He laughed. It wasn't a friendly laugh. It was sharp and dismissive. "Of course I'm serious, Theo. Look, I get that you like your quiet time or whatever, but this is what's happening. It's what's best for the family." And then he delivered the final blow, the one that shattered the last bit of my restraint. "Honestly, if you don't like it, you can always just go back to that cramped apartment in the city. It's not a big deal. Either way, this land is going to be Brenda's eventually, so you might as well get used to sharing." And there it was. The truth laid bare in all its ugly greed. I wasn't a father-in-law. I was an obstacle, a temporary occupant on his future property. My life, my wishes, my peace, they were all irrelevant details in his financial plan. In that moment, something inside me broke. But it wasn't my spirit. It was the dam that had been holding back a lifetime of quiet dignity, of turning the other cheek, of avoiding conflict for the sake of a fragile family peace. The hot rage that had been choking me suddenly vanished. It didn't fizzle out. It was replaced by something else entirely. A profound, chilling, and absolute calm. It was the calm of a general on the battlefield who finally sees the enemy's entire strategy and knows with perfect clarity exactly what he must do. Arguing with Kyle would be pointless. It would be like reasoning with a storm. He wouldn't hear my words. He would only see them as a challenge to his power. Yelling would only give him the satisfaction of knowing he had gotten under my skin. Pleading would be a pathetic surrender of the very dignity I needed to reclaim. No. The only way to fight a man like Kyle wasn't with emotion. It was with logic, with precision, and with a plan so meticulous and airtight that by the time he realized he was in a trap, the door would have already locked behind him. He thought he was giving me an ultimatum. He had no idea he was giving me a declaration of war. And in a war, the most powerful weapon is letting your enemy underestimate you. He saw me as a retired, sentimental old fool. Good. That fool was about to build one last project. Not a bridge of steel and concrete, but a cage. A perfect, inescapable cage crafted from Kyle's own arrogance. I took a slow, deep breath. The roaring in my ears stopped. The world came back into sharp focus. I could see every needle on the pine trees. I could feel the cool evening air on my skin. I was no longer a victim of his announcement. I was in control. He was still talking something about movers and schedules, but his voice was just background noise now. I let him finish. I let the silence hang in the air for a few heartbeats, letting him think he had won, letting him savor his victory. Then I spoke. My voice was even calm and completely devoid of the emotion he expected. "All right," I said. "Let them come." The next morning I didn't wake up with anger. I woke up with a purpose. For the first time in years, the fog of quiet resignation had lifted, replaced by the sharp, clean focus of an engineer with a problem to solve. And this was the most important project of my life. I didn't call Brenda. I didn't call Kyle. My first call was to a number I hadn't dialed in years, to the office of a man who had been a dear friend and colleague, a fellow builder named Marcus Williams. He had passed away a few years back, but I knew his daughter had followed him into a different kind of construction. She built cases instead of bridges. Her name was Aisha. I drove into the city, the familiar skyline, a stark contrast to the quiet woods I had left behind. But I wasn't intimidated. I had helped build this city. My fingerprints were on its steel skeleton. Aisha Williams's law office wasn't in one of the new glass towers Kyle so admired. It was in a beautifully restored brick building downtown, a place with history and character. The kind of place that was built to last. When I was shown into her office, she stood to greet me. She had her father's intelligent eyes, but they held a sharpness that was all her own. She was young, maybe early 30s, but she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone much older. "Mr. Richardson," she said, her handshake firm. "It's an honor. My father spoke of you often. Please have a seat." I didn't sit right away. From my worn leather briefcase, I began to place items on her polished mahogany desk. I did it slowly, methodically. Each document was a piece of the foundation I was about to lay. First, I unrolled a delicate yellowed piece of paper. "This," I said, my voice steady, "is the original deed to the 100 acres of land my grandfather Samuel Richardson purchased in 1928. He bought it with 5 years of savings from working at the lumber mill." Aisha leaned forward, her eyes scanning the old elegant script. She didn't say a word, just absorbed the history. Next, I placed a thick bound portfolio next to the deed. These are my original hand-drawn architectural and structural plans for the house I just completed on that land. Every support beam, every joint, every nail was specified by me. I tapped the cover. It was designed to stand for a century. Then came the modern documents. A recent property appraisal, its value shockingly high. My complete financial statements showing my pension, my investments, and my savings. A detailed list of every major expense I had covered for Brenda and Kyle over the past 10 years, college tuition, a down payment on their first home, cars, vacations. I had never kept a tally out of resentment, but out of a lifelong habit of meticulous record-keeping. I had documented everything. Finally, I placed a small framed photo in the center of the collection. It was of Beatrice, taken on the land the year before she passed. She was smiling, her face full of hope. That, I said softly, is the reason for all of this. I finally sat down. Aisha was silent for a long moment, her gaze moving from document to document, piecing together the story without me having to tell it. She wasn't looking at them like a lawyer scanning for loopholes. She was looking at them like an archaeologist studying a life. "My father said you were the most thorough man he ever knew," she said at last, looking up at me. "He said you could see a project's end from its very beginning. What is the project here, Mr. Richardson?" I took a breath. This was the critical moment. I couldn't let emotion cloud the objective. "My son-in-law has informed me that he is moving his parents into my home at the end of the month." I began, my tone as neutral as if I were describing a zoning issue. "He has made it clear that he views my property as a future asset for him and my daughter, and that my own residency there is conditional on my compliance with his plans." Aisha's expression didn't change, but I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Understanding. "He believes he has all the leverage," I continued. "He is relying on my love for my daughter to keep me from creating conflict. He sees me as a retired old man who has run out of moves." I leaned forward slightly. "I am not here today to file a restraining order or to start a messy family lawsuit. That is what he would expect. That is a battle fought on his terms with emotion and drama. I prefer to fight on my terms." "And what are your terms?" she asked, her voice quiet but intense. "Structure, permanence, legacy," I said. "Kyle thinks in terms of market value and quick profits. I think in terms of generations. That land has a unique ecosystem. It's a sanctuary for several species of migratory birds. My wife Beatrice was a passionate amateur botanist. She identified over 50 species of native plants on that property, some of them quite rare." I pointed to the photo of my wife. "Her dream was that the land would always be a place of peace, a place that gives back more than it takes. My son-in-law sees a potential subdivision. I see a promise I made to her that I intend to keep." Aisha's gaze sharpened. I could see the legal mind at work, now the tumblers clicking into place. "You're not talking about a simple will or a trust for your daughter," she said, a slow smile spreading across her face. "You're talking about something much more creative." "I'm a builder, Ms. Williams," I replied. "I've spent my life turning ideas into physical structures that last. I want to build a legal structure around that land, one that is permanent, ironclad, and serves a purpose greater than one family's financial gain. I want to explore my options for establishing a private conservation trust or a non-profit foundation. I want to turn my home, my land, my entire estate into a living memorial for my wife, a sanctuary that is protected in perpetuity, managed by a board and dedicated to environmental preservation and study." She leaned back in her chair, a look of genuine admiration in her eyes. "So when your son-in-law's parents arrive expecting to take over the master bedroom," she began, "they will instead be arriving at the headquarters of a registered, legally protected nature preserve," I finished. "They won't be guests in their son-in-law's future house. They will be on private foundation property subject to its rules and regulations." The smile on Aisha's face was now wide and bright. "Mr. Richardson," she said, her voice filled with a new energy. "This is the most elegant, most beautifully engineered solution I have ever heard of. It's not a defense, it's a checkmate." "I believe in building things correctly from the ground up," I said. "So tell me, Ms. Williams, what kind of permits do we need to get started?" For the next 2 hours, we weren't a client and a lawyer. We were two engineers, two builders poring over blueprints. We discussed the legal architecture, the tax implications, the bylaws of the new foundation. My meticulous records gave her everything she needed. My vision gave her a clear objective. When I left her office that afternoon, I felt lighter than I had in years. The first chess piece was not just on the board. It had been placed with such strategic precision that my opponent didn't even know the game had begun. He was still celebrating a victory in a battle he thought he had already won. He had no idea I had changed the entire war. The days that followed my meeting with Aisha were a quiet storm of activity. I worked from the small office in my new home, the room Beatrice would have called her study. The same sun that warmed my back as I sat at the desk also powered my new resolve. I had a list written on a crisp yellow legal pad. It wasn't a to-do list, it was a battle plan. Each item was a component, each phone call a step in the construction of my fortress. My first call was to a Dr. Eris Thorne, an environmental consultant whose name Aisha had given me. He was a professor at the state university, a man whose entire life was dedicated to the kind of preservation Beatrice had so admired. Dr. Thorne, I began, my voice clear and professional. My name is Theodore Richardson. I am the steward of a 100-acre parcel of old-growth forest in the foothills. I am in the process of establishing a private conservation trust, and I require a comprehensive ecological survey. I could hear the rustle of papers on his end. A private trust. That's ambitious, Mr. Richardson. What are you looking to achieve? I want to achieve permanence, I said simply. My late wife was a botanist. She documented dozens of species of flora on the property. We have a significant population of migratory songbirds that nest here each spring. I want to know what it would take to have the area formally designated as a protected habitat. I need to know about long-term monitoring equipment, trail cameras, and soil and water testing protocols. We spoke for nearly an hour. He used words like biodiversity, riparian zones, and keystone species. I used words like foundation, structure, and longevity. We were speaking different languages, but we understood each other perfectly. He saw a chance to protect a piece of the natural world. I saw a way to honor my wife and build a wall so high my son-in-law could never climb it. My next call was to a company called Helios Off-Grid Solutions. A young, energetic man answered. What can we do for you today? I have a 2,000-square-foot residence, I explained. I want to take it completely off the public utility. I need a solar array and battery storage system with enough capacity to handle 100% of the property's electrical needs year-round. The most important thing is reliability and independence. When the power goes out in the county, my lights need to stay on. He was impressed. That's a serious system, sir. Most people just want to lower their bill. You're talking about creating your own power plant. I'm talking about self-sufficiency, I corrected him. I want to control the flow of energy on my own land. We talked about kilowatt hours, battery chemistry, and inverters. I was back in my element discussing technical specifications and system redundancies. As I was making notes on the solar proposal, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Kyle. A wave of irritation washed over me, but I quickly suppressed it. I answered with the same calm, even tone I had used all morning. Hello, Kyle? Theo, just checking in, he said, his voice dripping with false concern. Wanted to see how you're doing. Not getting too spooked out there all by yourself. I'm keeping busy, Kyle, I said, looking at my list. Oh yeah, what are you up to tidying up the guest rooms? He chuckled. Mom's bringing her own linens, by the way. She's very particular about thread count. The sheer triviality of his concerns compared to the gravity of what I was actually doing was almost comical. He was worried about bed sheets while I was fundamentally altering the legal and physical reality of the ground beneath his feet. I'm just getting the place ready, I said, the words tasting like sweet irony in my mouth. Making a few upgrades to make sure everything is in order for their arrival. Good man, he said, the approval in his voice like a pat on the head for a dog. That's the spirit. Knew you'd come around. Brenda was a little worried you were upset, but I told her you just needed some time to adjust. It's a big change, I get it. I felt a flash of anger on Brenda's behalf. He was using her as a shield, painting her as the fragile one while he was the one causing all the turmoil. I'm fine, Kyle. Just want to make sure your parents are comfortable. Excellent. That's all I wanted to hear. All right, I'll let you get back to it. Don't work too hard, old man. He hung up. I stared at the phone for a long moment. Old man. He used the term like an insult, a synonym for irrelevant. He had no idea that this old man was using a lifetime of experience to outmaneuver him at every turn. He saw me puttering around a house, He didn't see me building a fortress. I drew a firm line through the first 2 items on my list and moved to the third. My final call of the day was to a local firm, Wildlands Security. I spoke to the owner. "I'm the trustee of a new nature preserve," I said. "We're having some issues with trespassing, and I'm concerned about poachers. I need a comprehensive security solution." "What did you have in mind?" the owner asked. "I want the main access road gated," I said. "An automated gate controlled remotely by me. I want motion-activated night vision cameras covering all property lines, not to watch people but to monitor wildlife and any unauthorized human activity. The system needs to be discreet but effective. The goal here is access control. We need to be able to lock the preserve down completely if necessary for the protection of the habitat." "And the residents?" the owner added. "Of course," I said. "And the residents." We finalized the details for the installation. When I hung up the phone, the sun was beginning to set. I looked at my list. The ecological survey was scheduled. The solar installation was being quoted. The security system was ordered. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening woods. Kyle thought I was preparing a house for his parents. He was wrong. I was preparing a cage. A self-sustaining, legally protected, electronically monitored cage. And the bait was the one thing he couldn't resist, the illusion of a free ride. A week later, I found myself back in Aisha Williams's office. The air this time was different. The first meeting had been about possibilities, about sketching a blueprint. Today was about pouring the concrete. On the large mahogany desk between us sat a stack of documents nearly 3 inches thick. It was bound in a simple professional blue cover. On the front, in gold lettering, were the words, "The Beatrice Richardson Conservation Trust." It looked solid, official, and permanent. It looked like something my wife would have been proud of. Aisha sat opposite me, a notary public seated quietly beside her. She had a calm, serious expression on her face. This wasn't just another case for her. I could tell she understood the weight of what we were about to do. "Theo," she began, her voice formal, "before we proceed, I need to make sure you are fully aware of the nature of this action. Once you sign these documents and they are filed with the state, the transfer is irrevocable. You will be legally transferring ownership of your land, your home, and a significant portion of your liquid assets into the trust. You will no longer be the individual owner. You will be the resident trustee bound by the bylaws and mission statement we have created. Do you understand this?" I looked from her determined face to the formidable stack of paper. For a fleeting moment, a sliver of doubt entered my mind. Was this too extreme? Was I sacrificing my own freedom to prove a point? Then I thought of Kyle's voice on the phone, so full of dismissive arrogance. I thought of Brenda, trapped and unhappy. And I thought of Beatrice, her dream of a peaceful sanctuary. The doubt vanished, replaced by the same cold, hard certainty I'd felt after that fateful call. "I understand completely, Aisha," I said. "This is not just something I want to do, it is something I have to do." She nodded, satisfied. "Very well. For the record, I am going to read a few key sections aloud before you sign. I want there to be no ambiguity." She opened the large binder to a marked page, her finger tracing the dense legal text. Article 1, Section A. The grantor, Theodore Richardson, does hereby irrevocably grant, convey, and transfer all rights, title, and interest in the property described in Appendix A, including all structures and improvements thereon, to the Beatrice Richardson Conservation Trust, hereinafter referred to as the Trust. She paused, looking at me over the top of the documents. Appendix A is the legal description of your 100 acres and the house. She turned a few pages. Article 2, Section C. The singular and exclusive purpose of the trust shall be the preservation of the natural habitat, the protection of native flora and fauna, and the support of non-invasive environmental research. No portion of the trust's assets, real or otherwise, may be sold, subdivided, mortgaged, or used for commercial or residential purposes that deviate from this stated mission. Her voice was clear and strong, each word a brick being laid in the wall I was building. This was the heart of it. The clause that turned Kyle's dream of a subdivision into a legal impossibility. "Now," she said, flipping to another section. Article 4, Section B, regarding your role. You, Theodore Richardson, are hereby appointed as the lifetime resident trustee. You are entitled to live in the primary residence on the property for the remainder of your natural life, and you are tasked with the day-to-day oversight of the grounds and research activities." She then moved to the next page, and her eyes met mine with a look of shared understanding. This was the gear that would make the trap spring. Article 5, Section D. The Board of Trustees may at its discretion approve the temporary residency of research fellows, students, or non-compensated volunteers. All such residents are guests of the trust, not of any individual trustee. Their stay is conditional upon their active and documented participation in the trust's conservation mission and their strict adherence to all bylaws outlined in this document. The board reserves the right to terminate the residency of any individual who fails to comply with these terms, effective immediately. I let the words sink in. Non-compensated volunteers, active and documented participation, termination of residency. It was a masterpiece of legal language. It offered a hand of welcome that could turn into an iron fist at a moment's notice. Aisha closed the binder. The remainder of the document details the formation of the board, the financial structuring, and the protocols for the research grants we will eventually offer. It is exactly as we discussed. Are you ready? I looked at the photograph of Beatrice I had brought with me again, which sat on the corner of the desk. I was keeping my promise to her. More than that, I was ensuring her name would be associated with preservation and peace long after I was gone. Kyle wanted to turn my legacy into a quick profit. Instead, I was turning it into a fortress that would protect itself long after I was gone. The notary pushed a pen and the signature page towards me. My hand was steady as I picked up the pen. The pen felt heavy, not with doubt, but with the weight of generations. The weight of my grandfather's labor, my father's hopes, and my own life's work. My signature was not the spidery scrawl of an old man. It was the firm, confident stroke of an engineer signing off on his final, greatest design. I signed a dozen pages, my name a repeating motif of finality. With each signature, I felt a burden lifting from my shoulders. The anger I had carried was transforming into a sense of profound, righteous peace. When it was done, the notary stamped the pages with a satisfying thud. Aisha gathered the documents, her movements crisp and efficient. "It's done, Theo," she said, a genuine smile on her face. "I will file this with the county and the state first thing in the morning. As of tomorrow at 9 a.m., the Beatrice Richardson Conservation Trust will officially exist. You are no longer just a man in a house. You are the steward of a protected sanctuary." I stood up and shook her hand, and then the notary's. "Thank you, Aisha, for helping me build something that will last." "No, Theo," she said, her grip firm. "Thank you for having the vision." As I walked out of the old brick building and into the bustling city, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. The trap was set. The legal foundation was unshakable. All that was left was to wait for the quarry, blinded by their own greed and arrogance, to walk right into it. The last 2 weeks of the month were a strange kind of quiet. The installations were completed with quiet efficiency. The solar panels were a dark, silent grid on the roof. The new automated gate at the entrance to the access road stood open, waiting. The small, discreet cameras were nearly invisible among the trees. The house itself held its breath. On the final day of the month, the day of their arrival, I didn't feel nervous. I felt like I did on the morning of a major bridge inspection. All the calculations were done, all the materials were in place. All that was left was for the load to be applied. I sat on the porch in a simple wooden rocking chair, the one I had built myself. I wasn't pacing, I wasn't wringing my hands. I was just sitting watching the gravel road that wound its way through my trees. At precisely 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I heard it. The low rumble of a heavy engine, the crunch of tires on gravel. A large, yellow moving truck lumbered into view, followed by Kyle's shiny black SUV. The invasion had begun. The SUV pulled up first. Kyle hopped out of the driver's side, a king arriving at a newly conquered castle. He puffed out his chest, put his hands on his hips, and surveyed the property with a broad, proprietary smile. His parents, Gary and Karen, emerged from the passenger side. Gary was a large man, his expensive polo shirt stretched tight over his belly. He had the look of a man who had never done a day of physical labor in his life. He immediately started pointing. "We'll have to clear some of those trees," he announced to no one in particular. "They block the afternoon sun." Karen was thin and severe, with perfectly coiffed hair that looked like it would shatter in a strong wind. She clutched a designer handbag to her chest and eyed my handcrafted home as if it were a rustic shack she was being forced to endure. I hope the closets are a decent size. She sniffed, her gaze lingering on the porch with disdain. And the gravel is going to be murder on my shoes. The last person to get out of the car was Brenda. She moved slowly like she was wading through thick mud. She was pale, her shoulders were slumped, and she wouldn't look at me. Her eyes were fixed on the ground on the gravel her mother-in-law found so offensive. She looked like a prisoner being led to her cell. I didn't move from my chair. I just watched them. I watched as Kyle clapped his father on the back as Karen whispered something critical in his ear as Brenda stood apart from them all, radiating misery. Finally, Kyle noticed me. He strode over, his smile unwavering. "Theo, there you are, soaking up the last of your solitude, eh?" "Hello, Kyle," I said, my voice perfectly level. "Gary, Karen, welcome." Gary grunted in acknowledgement. "So this is it. It'll do. The master bedroom has the balcony you said." "That's right," Kyle answered for me. "Best view in the house. I made sure of it." Karen walked over to one of the porch posts, running a finger along the smooth sanded wood. "It's all a bit brown, isn't it?" she commented. "We'll have to get some painters in here. A nice white or a light gray would really open the place up." They spoke as if I wasn't there. They discussed additions, renovations, and redecorating my home right in front of me. Brenda finally looked up, her eyes pleading with me. She wanted me to say something to stop them to fight, but she didn't understand. The time for fighting with words was over. I simply stood up from my rocking chair. "You must be tired from the drive," I said, my voice calm and welcoming. "Why don't you all come inside? I'll show you around." Kyle's smile broadened. He thought this was it, the moment of his complete victory, my final surrender. "Now you're talking, Theo," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. He turned to his parents. "See, I told you he'd come around." I turned and walked toward the front door I had built with my own hands. I could feel their footsteps behind me, the confident stride of Kyle, the heavy tread of his father, the hesitant shuffle of my daughter. They were following me right where I wanted them to go. I put my key in the lock and opened the door to their new life. I led them into the main living area, the heart of the house. A large stone fireplace stood on the far wall, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the forest. The afternoon light streamed in, illuminating the room in a warm golden glow. For a moment, they were all silent, taken aback by the simple, solid beauty of the place. The moment didn't last. "Well," Karen announced, breaking the spell as she swept her critical gaze over the handcrafted furniture. "It has good bones, I'll give it that, but this is all very rustic. It will need a lot of work to feel like a home." Gary walked over to the fireplace, patting the solid stone mantel. "I'll mount a big screen TV right here," he declared. "A 75-incher at least. Honey, where did they pack the remote for the satellite dish?" "I don't have a satellite dish, Gary," I said calmly. He turned to look at me, his brow furrowed in confusion. "No satellite. How do you get any channels out here in the middle of nowhere?" "I don't," I replied. "I read." Karen looked horrified. "No television? What on earth are we supposed to do in the evenings?" Kyle, who had been busy on his phone, looked up with an irritated expression. "Dad, it's fine. Nobody watches cable anymore. We'll just stream everything. Theo, what's the Wi-Fi password?" This was the first test. I looked directly at him. "There is no Wi-Fi." A stunned silence fell over the room. They all stared at me as if I had just told them the house had no running water. "What do you mean there's no Wi-Fi?" Kyle asked, his voice sharp with disbelief. "Are you serious? I have work to do. My mother needs to stream her shows. Did you not upgrade the internet like I told you to?" "I did not," I said. "The basic connection I have is through a small satellite dish on the roof, and it's for email and emergencies only. It's not strong enough for streaming or video calls." "This is ridiculous," Karen snapped, her voice rising. "This is completely unacceptable. Gary, we can't live like this." Now, Karen," Kyle said, holding up a hand to placate her while shooting me a look of pure fury. "Don't worry, I'll handle this. I'll call the cable company first thing Monday morning and have them run a fiber optic line out here. I don't care what it costs. We are not living in the dark ages." He looked at me, his jaw tight. "I can't believe this. After all the planning, you couldn't handle one simple thing." As if on cue, there was a polite, firm knock at the front door. Everyone turned. I felt a small, satisfied smile touch my lips. "Excuse me," I said. I'm expecting someone. I walked to the door and opened it. Standing on the porch was Aisha Williams. She was dressed in a sharp, dark gray business suit and held a leather portfolio. She looked professional, confident, and completely in charge. "Aisha," I said warmly. "Thank you for coming. Please come in." She stepped inside her presence, immediately shifting the atmosphere in the room. Kyle stared at her, then at me, a look of suspicion on his face. "Who's this?" he demanded. "We're having a private family moment here." "Aisha Williams," she said, her voice clear and steady as she stepped forward and offered a hand he didn't take. "And I'm afraid I must correct you. You're not having a private family moment. You are on private foundation property, and I'm here in my official capacity as legal counsel and chairwoman of the board for the Beatrice Richardson Conservation Trust." The room went dead silent. Kyle's smug expression faltered, replaced by a look of utter confusion. Gary and Karen exchanged a bewildered glance. Brenda, who had been hovering near the doorway, looked like she was about to faint. "The what?" Kyle finally managed to say. "The Beatrice Richardson Conservation Trust." Aisha repeated, her tone patient, as if explaining something to a child. She opened her portfolio. "As of 9 a.m. yesterday, my client, Mr. Theodore Richardson, enacted an irrevocable transfer of this entire 100-acre property, including this residence and all other structures, into the ownership of this newly formed state-registered nonprofit foundation." She paused, letting the words hang in the air like smoke. "I'm sorry," Gary grumbled, shaking his head. "I don't understand all that legal mumbo-jumbo." "What does that mean?" Aisha turned her calm professional gaze on him. "It means, Mr. Anderson, that you are not standing in Mr. Richardson's house. You are standing in the Central Research and Administrative Building of a legally protected nature preserve." Karen let out a small, strangled gasp. Kyle's face had gone from confused to pale. That's not possible," he stammered. "This property belongs to Theo. It's his to do with as he pleases. It's his legacy, for Brenda." "Indeed," Aisha agreed smoothly. "And Mr. Richardson has chosen to shape that legacy in a way that honors his late wife. The stated legally binding and exclusive purpose of this trust is the preservation of the natural habitat and the support of environmental science. The charter, which is now a public document, strictly forbids any sale, subdivision, or use of the property for purely residential or commercial purposes." Kyle took a step forward, his voice a low growl. "You're lying. This is some kind of trick. Theo, what is this nonsense? Tell her to leave." "Aisha is not lying." "Kyle," I said, my voice finally breaking its silence. It felt good to speak to confirm the truth. "Every word she has said is the legal truth." The color drained completely from Kyle's face as the reality of the situation began to dawn on him. The house he had seen as his future country estate, the land he had mentally carved up into profitable lots, had just vanished before his eyes. "So what does that mean?" Karen asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. "Where are we supposed to live?" Aisha looked at her. "Well, that brings me to the reason for my visit. The Trust's bylaws, which Mr. Richardson helped draft, have a provision for guests, Article 5, Section D to be precise. It allows for the temporary rent-free residency of individuals who are willing to serve as non-compensated full-time volunteers dedicated to assisting with the Trust's conservation mission." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The final door of the trap swung shut. It was the look on Kyle's face at that moment that I will never forget. The confusion, the disbelief, the dawning horror, all of it finally coalesced into a single explosive expression of pure, unadulterated rage. His carefully constructed facade of the charming, in-control son-in-law shattered into a million pieces. "Volunteers!" he roared, his voice cracking. He spun around and pointed a trembling finger at me, his face contorted into an ugly mask. You did this. This was all a setup. You were never going to let them move in. You were playing me this whole time." His voice echoed in the high-ceilinged room, the first truly honest sound he had ever made in my presence. It was the raw, desperate cry of a predator who had just realized that the prey he had been stalking had led him step by perfect step right into a cage. And I just stood there calm and silent and watched him begin to rattle the bars. Aisha didn't even flinch at Kyle's outburst. She let his shouts echo and fade into a tense silence, then she addressed the room with the unshakable calm of a seasoned professional. "As I was saying, she continued as if he hadn't spoken a word. "I am here to help on board our new resident volunteers. I've prepared a welcome packet for each of you." She placed 3 neatly bound documents on the coffee table. They looked official and intimidating. This packet contains a copy of the Trust's mission statement, a detailed map of the preserve's boundaries, and a full list of the bylaws and community guidelines you'll be expected to follow during your stay. Karen stared at the documents as if they were venomous snakes. "This is absurd," she hissed. "We are not volunteers. We are family." "Legally," Aisha countered, her voice polite but firm, "your relationship with Mr. Richardson is personal. Your relationship with this property is now governed by the Trust. Allow me to highlight a few of the key guidelines to get you started." She picked up one of the documents, opening it to a marked page. "First, let's discuss the labor contribution. As non-compensated residents, each of you is required to contribute a minimum of 20 hours per week of documented work towards the Trust's mission." Gary, who had collapsed into an armchair, sputtered. "Work? What kind of work?" "The duties are varied," Aisha said, reading from the page. "They may include the removal of invasive plant species, maintenance of the perimeter fences and hiking trails, data entry from the wildlife trail cameras, and assisting Mr. Richardson with the upkeep of the native plant nursery he is establishing in honor of his wife." The color drained from Gary's face. He looked at his soft, manicured hands as if imagining them pulling weeds for the first time. "Second," Aisha went on, relentless, "is our resource conservation policy. As this facility is now entirely off-grid, all residents are expected to be mindful of their energy and water consumption. The solar and battery system provides for all essential needs, but it has its limits. This means hot water is available for 5 minutes per person per day. Non-essential appliances such as televisions, hair dryers, and extra heaters are not permitted. A full list of prohibited high-draw electronics is on page 12. Karen let out a horrified squeak. I saw her hand instinctively go to her perfectly styled hair. The idea of living without her creature comforts was clearly more terrifying to her than the prospect of manual labor. Third, property integrity. Aisha's eyes briefly met mine. The Trust's charter explicitly forbids any alteration, structural or cosmetic, to any buildings or landscapes within the preserve. There will be no painting, no redecorating, no removal of furniture, and absolutely no clearing of trees. This house is now considered a historical component of the preserve's founding, and its current state is to be maintained in perpetuity. Gary's jaw, which had been hanging open, snapped shut. I could almost hear the sound of his 75-inch television dream shattering into a million pieces. "Fourth, access and logistics," Aisha said, turning the page. "For the protection of our nocturnal wildlife, the main access gate at the road is on an automatic timer. It will be locked every evening at 6 p.m. and will reopen at 8 a.m. There are no exceptions. Furthermore, to minimize the ecological disruption, delivery services such as Amazon, FedEx, and all food delivery are not permitted on the property. A mailbox is located by the main gate for standard postal service." The walls of their new home were closing in, becoming a cage. They were being cut off from the world of convenience they had always known. "And finally," Aisha said, her voice carrying a note of finality, "compliance. As chairwoman of the board, I or another designated board member will conduct weekly inspections to ensure all guidelines are being followed and labor logs are being kept up to date. Failure to comply with any of the bylaws will be considered a breach of your volunteer agreement. A first breach will result in a formal warning. A second breach will result in the immediate termination of your residency status. You will be given a 24-hour notice to vacate the property." She closed the document with a soft, definitive sound. She had built the cage and explained in excruciating detail exactly how the lock worked. For a long moment, no one spoke. The Andersons were utterly stunned, trapped between the humiliating terms of their stay and the even greater humiliation of admitting defeat and leaving. Finally, Kyle, who had been trembling with silent rage, seemed to find his voice. He ignored Aisha completely. He rounded the coffee table and stood directly in front of me, his face just inches from mine. His eyes were wild with fury and disbelief. "Why?" he spat, his voice low and venomous. "Why would you do this after everything I've done for Brenda, everything we were building? You would destroy your own family over a house." I looked at him. I didn't see a son-in-law. I didn't even see an adversary. I saw a spoiled child who had finally been told no for the first time in his life. I felt no anger, no hatred, only a profound, pitying calm. I haven't destroyed anything, Kyle, I said, my voice quiet, but carrying through the silent room. I have protected my family, and I have protected my wife's memory. Every action I have taken has been a reaction to one of yours. I stood up from my chair so we were standing eye to eye. You told me your parents needed to be closer to nature. Now they will have that opportunity every single day. You told me that I should get used to sharing. This is me sharing my wife's dream with the world instead of letting you sell it for profit. You told me this house was a great investment for the future. And you were right. It is now an investment in a future where my grandchildren can come and see the legacy of the woman they never met, a legacy of peace and preservation, not greed. He was speechless, his mouth opening and closing, with no sound coming out. You wanted this house, Kyle, I said, delivering the final quiet blow. You just never bothered to read the terms and conditions. The Andersons did not leave immediately. Pride or perhaps sheer disbelief kept them rooted to the spot for 3 agonizing weeks. I did not engage with them. I did not have to. The house, the land, the rules, they did all the work for me. I simply went about my new routine as the resident trustee, observing the slow, inevitable collapse of their arrogance. The first week was a dark comedy of errors. I would watch from my office window as Gary, dressed in brand new, stain-free work boots, would attempt to clear a patch of invasive ivy. He would last no more than 10 minutes before retreating to the porch, red-faced and panting, to complain about the humidity or his bad back. Karen refused to participate in any task that involved dirt. She spent her first 20-hour work week organizing the foundation's administrative office, which amounted to her sitting in my study complaining about the lack of comfortable seating and attempting to order expensive ergonomic chairs on a credit card that was of course declined as the trust had no line of credit. Their evenings were filled with arguments, their sharp, angry voices carrying through the quiet house. They fought about whose turn it was to do the data entry about the 5-minute showers, about the lack of entertainment. They were prisoners in a paradise they had tried to steal, and they were turning on each other like rats in a cage. By the second week, the comedy had curdled into a bitter resentment. They began to test the boundaries, looking for loopholes. One afternoon, I saw a pizza delivery car at the main gate. Karen was there trying to convince the young driver to walk the half-mile up the gravel road to the house. The driver quite reasonably refused. I watched Karen have a full-blown tantrum by the side of the road, her carefully constructed composure finally cracking. On Saturday, Aisha arrived for her first weekly inspection. She was polite, professional, and missed nothing. She noted the unfulfilled labor logs. She pointed out the scorch mark on the back patio where they had tried to use a portable grill, a clear violation of the fire safety rules. She issued them their first formal warning, her voice calm and unwavering as she explained the consequences of a second breach. I saw the look in Kyle's eyes as he watched her. It was the look of a man who was used to being able to charm, bully, or buy his way out of any situation, realizing for the first time that he was facing a system he could not manipulate. The end came on a Tuesday, 19 days after they arrived. Another moving truck, the same one that had brought them here, rumbled up the road. There was no fanfare, just a grim, silent retreat. Gary and Karen moved with a sullen bitterness, refusing to even look at me. They piled their boxes into the truck, their dreams of a free retirement home packed away with their unused tennis rackets and fancy kitchen gadgets. Brenda was there. She hadn't come with them but had driven up separately. I thought at first she was there to help them, but I soon realized she was there for a final confrontation. As I sat on the porch pretending to read a book, their argument erupted near Kyle's SUV, a final ugly explosion. "I can't believe this, Brenda." Kyle's voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet morning air. "After all this, you're not coming with us. You're choosing him over me, over your husband. I'm not choosing him over you, Kyle." Brenda's voice was stronger than I had heard it in years. It was shaking, but it was firm. "I'm choosing myself. I'm choosing my own self-respect. For years, I have watched you dismiss my father. I watched you treat him not like a person, but like a bank account, like an asset to be managed. I made excuses for you. I told myself you were just ambitious. But I was wrong. You're not ambitious. You're a user. I did this for us," he yelled. "For our future. That land, that house, it was supposed to be ours." "No," Brenda said, her voice dropping but filled with a new, hard strength. "It was supposed to be yours. I was just the excuse you used to try and get it. You never cared about what I wanted. You never cared about my father's feelings. You only cared about what you could take. You stood in my father's home, and you let your parents talk about tearing it apart like vultures picking over a corpse, and I stood there, and I said nothing. I will never be that person again." There was a long silence. Then Kyle laughed, a short, ugly, humorless sound. "Fine," he spat. "Stay here with your old man in his precious bird sanctuary. See what good it does you when you have nothing." He got into the car, slamming the door behind him. Gary and Karen followed, not even glancing at their daughter-in-law. The SUV sped down the gravel road, spitting rocks in its wake, followed by the lumbering moving truck. They were gone, and for the first time in a long time, the air felt clean again. After they left, a profound quiet settled over the house. It wasn't an empty silence. It was a healing silence. The air itself felt lighter, cleansed of the tension and greed that had filled it. A few days later, I was sitting on the porch watching a family of blue jays argue in an old oak tree when Brenda's car came quietly up the gravel road. She got out and walked towards me, not with the hesitant shuffle of before, but with a new, uncertain straightness in her shoulders. She sat in the rocking chair beside me, and for a long time we just listened to the sounds of the forest. "Dad," she finally said, her voice soft, "I am so sorry. For everything. For not seeing it, for not standing up to him sooner, for letting him disrespect you." I reached over and placed my hand on hers. "You were trying to keep your family together, Brenda. I understand that." "But I almost lost you," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "I almost let him take this all away from you." "He couldn't take this away from me," I said, looking out at the trees. "Because it was never just mine to give. It belongs to your grandfather's hard work and your grandmother's dreams and your mother's love." Kyle was never fighting me for a house. He was fighting against all of that. It was a battle he was always going to lose. I squeezed her hand gently. "Your mother used to say that dignity is the one thing nobody can take from you. You can lose money, you can lose houses, but you can never lose your self-respect unless you willingly hand it over. Don't ever let anyone, not Kyle, not anyone, make you feel like you have to give away your dignity just to keep the peace." She nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I'm not going to," she said. "Not anymore." We sat for another hour talking more than we had in years. We talked about her future and the kids and about Beatrice. When she left, there was a new lightness in her step. Our relationship wasn't magically fixed, but it was on solid ground again, built on truth instead of secrets. I stayed on the porch as the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. The house stood behind me, a quiet testament to a promise kept. The land stretched out before me, a permanent sanctuary of peace. My wife's legacy was safe, my family was healing, and my home, my true home, was finally at peace. This whole ordeal taught me a powerful lesson. True family is built on a foundation of respect, not entitlement. When that foundation is threatened by greed, silence is not an option. I learned that true strength doesn't come from angry words, but from quiet, careful planning and unwavering integrity. Protecting the legacy my wife and I built was never about winning a battle over a house. It was about reclaiming the peace and self-respect that are the true inheritance. It is never too late to stand up for your own dignity and define the terms by which you will be valued. What would you have done in my shoes? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.